Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our February 3rd Dunellen Borough Council meeting. Our first order of business is a call to order and a rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty, and justice for all. Next up on the agenda is item number 2, sunshine statement and roll call by our municipal clerk, Mrs. Lauren Statz.
This meeting of the Dunellen Borough Council is called pursuant to the provisions of the Open Public Meetings Law. This meeting of February 3rd, 2025 was included in a list of meetings that was advertised in the Courier on January 9th, 2025, and as a teleconference was noticed on the official Dunellen website on January 31st, 2025, and on the public bulletin board on North Avenue on January 1st, 2025, and has remained continuously posted as the required notice. Mayor Salento,
Present.
Council President Sigmund,
Here.
Mrs. Albertson,
Here.
Mrs. Lance,
Here.
Mrs. Rios,
Here.
Mr. Scott,
Here.
and Mr. Vandermark.
Here.
Next up is item number 3, presentations. We have a presentation tonight by Dr. Listikin and his students for synthesizing historic cultural preservation and economic opportunity, Dunellen Perspectives by Blaustein School of Public Planning and Public Policy. So Dr. Listikin, a good friend of Dunellen, welcome back.
For the opportunity. They should have been a student in here, but they had a little COVID in their house.
Oh, boy.
It's a wonderful one. You're training for the family, this is what you're gonna be doing. Wouldn't it be nice? And, so I like to thank the mayor and council and this was government and the public for allowing Rutgers to collaborate, work with the community on studio. What's a studio? Well, it's real life as opposed to just ivory tower readings and what have you. We work with the clients in this case and on topics of these things. And we have the good fortune, this is now 3 to 4. You know, we've done studios on Little, on Main Street, on students and businesses. And this is the topic. We're going to look at historic preservation, but look at it as an interest that connects with the fourth economic development.
Everybody at home.
The topic is historic preservation and economic development and how they can mutually support one another. And again, this is a studio, so this is a student work effort done by students in the Blaustein School, the Rutgers Blaustein School of Planning and Public Policy, where they do a studio. They work with a client on a topic. This past term, we only had a few students, but I told them you're like the Marines on that. You know, the few, the proud, okay, but we will hopefully do the best we can. I'd like to share with you some of their work. Okay. What I'd like to do tonight is very briefly give you an executive summary, because let's face it, it's like let's jump into what is more important, and then I will cover some of these other subjects. Some interesting resources we found on the historic frame and the evolution of Dunellen, how historic preservation can connect with economic development. Dunellen is really almost unique in that There are a lot of surveys done of the community. I know really of very few other communities when there's a topic of interest that the community itself is surveyed. So that was done here, and I'll report on the findings. What are some of the tools from historic preservation that could be used to encourage investment, specifically tax credits? Okay. An interesting related topic. It's like there are various ways to remember and preserve a community. And one way is by doing oral histories. And I'll share that with you. Okay. Executive summary, I'm not going to read because that's deadly and I'm going to be covering this subject. There's a lot of history and fabric to preserve in Dunellen. And you all realize that. Why do we do historic preservation? Well, you know, there are cultural, historic, aesthetic reasons, but sort of the theme of this studio is that it's really connected to and can support economic development. There's two examples of that. The Main Street program, which has a historic preservation theme, it's been implemented nationally, and cumulatively they've done $100 billion worth of investment, and the federal historic tax credit has been applied to $200 billion of rehabilitation. And I'll go into that in some more detail shortly. We surveyed, again, thank you, Dunellen, residents, and historic preservation was supported. Why? Well, we want to preserve, tell our story, etc., etc. Also, many Dunellen residents said, yeah, we might support a local historic commission. That's not the only way that you can do historic preservation. Okay. Again, because of the theme of economic development and preservation, very key is a federal historic tax credit. So that's a 20% credit if you rehabilitate an historic and identified historic property in an appropriate fashion. So if you do $1 million worth of historic rehab, your taxes are reduced by $200,000. It's been used throughout New Jersey. Roughly about 200 projects have used this federal historic tax credit. About $1.7 billion of investment there, and that gave the people involved with those projects $350 million of tax credits. So that reduced the federal taxes. And it's been a long fight, but New Jersey, as of 2 years ago, has added an additional state historic tax credit. So that's piggybacked over and above the federal historic tax credit. I know the community has been interested in the special improvement district and how can that connect with preservation, and using Main Street as an example. Many of the Main Street programs in New Jersey also have a business special improvement district or business improvement district. You know, some further facets, including oral histories. I don't think that would be the first thing you would think about preservation, but it's really a nice opportunity for the community. This is more visual rather than professor talking too much. So without too much effort, we were able to find some nice historic resources, fabric showing the community over time. Okay? And of course, you have people in town very interested in this, you know, going back to a map from 1868. Of course, the evolution of the art-colored printing factory. At one time, Dunellen and other New Jersey communities had trolleys. Well, this is a postcard from that. And again, these speak for themselves. You know, Newmarket Road, Dunellen Avenue, how it looked way back when. These were coming from the historic postcard. The high school, it really hasn't changed all that much. The train station, okay, you see behind the trees, an earlier view, and of course today. North Avenue, then and now. We also said, what would be a visual way to look at the evolution of a community? So there's something called Sanborn maps. What were they? these were maps and information put together by insurance companies because they were insuring properties, okay? And they did this for many decades where they identified all the properties in a town over time. And you know, different color coding is what types of properties, et cetera. And they did that across the United States. So I thought, well, wouldn't it be interesting? Let's look at the Sanborn maps for Dunellen to see how the community looked way back when, and then side by side with the Google Earth, and that's basically what we do. So again, these are to the left, Sanborn map as of 1919, and you know, you see how much more development we have today. Washington Park, again, not surprisingly, you know, a bunch of development over time. Columbia Park, there wasn't that many buildings there. 1919 versus today. So I thought, you know that, and I'm really impressed with how much Dunellen is doing to develop, redevelop, and there's an appreciation of the community. So as well as you have to pay the bills. So you know, how does this all connect with economic development? Well, why don't we do a star preservation? What is a star preservation? And you know, you're identifying, evaluating, and you're trying to protect the historic and cultural fabric. Why are you doing it? For numerous reasons, you know, aesthetic reasons, cultural reasons, environmental reasons. You know, you're saving energy if you can reuse existing property. But given the theme of the studio, there are very significant economic benefits from preservation in terms of job, income creation, etc. on that. And this could be a flavor of that. So there's a National Trust for Historic Preservation, and they have a Main Street program in thousands of communities nationally. And it's really economic development, emphasizing the original character of the downtown. So it embodies preservation. These numbers speak for themselves. So cumulatively, since 1980, in all these Main Street communities, you know, $102 billion worth of investment and, you know, jobs, et cetera. And just in 2022, over $6 billion, et cetera, on that. So I think it's one facet of preservation that's not fully appreciated. You know, it can foster and support economic development. The federal historic tax credit, well, it's been chugging along since the late 1970s, and cumulatively, so again, that's the 20% credit. You do historic rehab, $1 million, you get $200,000 off your federal taxes. But cumulatively, that's been almost $200 billion, and that has supported, you know, 3 million jobs and lots of income and GDP, et cetera. And just in 2022, there was $8 billion worth of that investment in that. So, what does the community think about all this? Well, again, capitalizing on Dunellen's willingness and ability to survey its residents on different topics. That's very unusual. We're working with the community. We developed a survey. Actually, these questions, for the most part, parallel questions that the National Trust had surveyed. All right. So so how important is historic preservation to you? Well, you know, overwhelmingly 95% of the respondents thought it's either very important, 60%, or somewhat important, 34%, which almost in a mirror fashion reflects what the national survey was. So the community is saying, you know what, this is important. And why do we do this? So these responses, by the way, are parallel to the National Trust survey. So what were the top reasons why people would support historic preservation in Dunellen? Okay, preserve neighborhood character, tell our story, history, to save the community's treasures, to preserve a sense of community. But as you can see, that there were many reasons given by the respondents to the survey. Now, we asked, what's your assessment of the following topics? You know, with one being not important and 5 being the most important. So interesting. safety in the town area was ranked as the purple. Most important, reliable train service, and after that, pretty much at the same level was historic preservation and affordable housing. Okay. Now, there are many ways to go about historic preservation. One way is to establish a local commission. You don't have to do this. So we asked, should a commission be established? Okay, and roughly 2/3 said yes. Okay. At the same time, okay, you can see about a quarter said no. So again, there isn't uniform support, but you can see some support for establishing the commission, and this is where you get not much more difference of opinion. All right, when you establish a commission, it could be just advisory, it could be more regulatory with oversight. So it's like, well, what type of commission would you want to see? This was a question posed in the survey, okay? And it was mixed. So, you know, advisory was 38% and others felt differently on that. So I'm really not surprised. And also, it's hard in a survey because there are a lot of nuances to this. But I think what we're saying is that, you know, the feedback from the Dunellen survey is preservation is important, you know, for some core reasons, et cetera. Kind of would be nice to have some entity like maybe a commission to further this, and we're not exactly sure, you know, the purview of that commission. We also asked how important are oral histories, and as you can see, many thought it was important on that. Okay. Since this topic is preservation and economic development and supporting it, let's look briefly at that. All right, so there's a federal historic tax credit. That's the 20% credit. It's uncapped. A lot of credits are capped. This is totally uncapped. 2 years ago, New Jersey added a state historic tax credit over and above the federal credit. And there are some other programs that are often used in conjunction. You don't have to use it with the historic tax credit, but commonly are used. Low income housing tax credit, new market tax credit, opportunity zones. I'll explain those in a moment. Now, most key is the federal historic tax credit. It's a 20% credit. It's uncapped. Again, so like if you had $1 billion project, you would get $200 million worth of reduction on your federal taxes. You take that over 5 years. Okay, the property has to be identified as historic, like for instance on the national or state register. They want to see a significant investment. They want to see that the rehabilitation is compatible with the historic fabric, and they're actually, you can layer other real estate benefits with this on that. Okay, but again, 20% credit speaks for itself as far as a major benefit. Now, you look at in New Jersey, we've been using the federal historic tax credit, about $1.7 billion of rehab has used this federal historic tax credit. Giving the developers about $350 million of federal tax credits on it. So it has been used, and it's been used significantly across the United States as well. Now, just to give you a flavor, this was the Hain department store in Newark. It was the department store in Newark was in its days the place where you went to shop. It closed. It was abandoned. And it was recently brought back in a stunning adaptive reuse in historic preservation. So they have the supermarket, they have offices, they have housing, etc. Using many subsidies, including the federal historic tax credit. Now, the state historic tax credit, actually, New Jersey came late to this. Until 2 years ago, New Jersey didn't have this additional state historic tax credit, and if it passed, it can be quite a significant tax credit. The states in blue are the states that have state historic tax credit, which is over and above the federal historic tax credit. All right, so I'm using this as an example because this could look like a property on the main street of Dunellen. So this was a drugstore that was rehabilitated, used the federal historic tax credit, and this was in South Carolina on the state historic tax credit. So the federal and state historic tax credits, this was a $3.8 million project. Totaled about 1.3 million, which was the size of the bank loan. So you see how significant that the credit can be, okay? It always takes time to get the paperwork and to have all the facets of a program. So the state historic tax credit was just 2 years ago that it was authorized. This is one of the first projects. So this was an office building in Atlantic City that used the state historic tax credit. I would assume used the federal historic tax credit as well. Here are some other, again, this is not per se historic. Low-income housing tax credit is a 40 to 90% credit over 10 years to do affordable housing. New market tax credits is for economic development. It's a 39% credit over 7 years. Opportunity zones, you either defer, reduce, or eliminate capital gains if you invest in an opportunity zone on that. Okay. Now, so not surprisingly, you have, of course, in New Jersey, across the United States, where they now layer, besides the federal historic tax credit and sometimes the state historic tax credit, but these other credits. So this was a project in Louisiana. It was adaptive reuse of the surplus school for housing, and it used the low-income housing tax credit. Okay. There's a source called Policy Map that's not always right, okay, but it spatially maps various types of data, including where have different programs be used and where's the eligibility for the program. Now, Dunellen is not eligible for that new market tax credits, because that's slotted for communities more in economic distress. Similarly, not eligible for the opportunity zone. You can use the low-income housing tax credit. Yeah, that's not identified to an area. It's just that if you meet the criteria, one can get this 40 or 90% credit over 10 years. Okay, and as far as we can tell, the historic tax credit has not been used yet in Dunellen. That could be wrong because this is a mapping thing, but clearly it hasn't been much that the historic tax credit. All right, so how would you use the historic tax credit? Well, first, you have to identify a resource as historic. Okay, the state has this is a State Historic Preservation Office. They now do things nicely with GIS and they spatially map it so that they map where are the historic resources in New Jersey. Okay, this is in the source called Lucy. Okay, and again, some of this can be sort of a little behind the times. When you look at the Lucy data for Dunellen, there is some historic identification in eligible historic district and eligible individual property, etc. But a lot more can be identified. Just to give you, again, it's not an A to B comparison. You see other communities have identified more, in terms of districts and individual properties, which then allow you to use the federal historic tax credit and the state historic tax credit. Okay. Well, I'm talking about historic preservation. Dunellen is, you've been thinking about a special improvement district, and the answer is the two can connect and support one another. Okay. So looking at 25 Main Street programs, that's the historic preservation clean program. 16 have a bid and SID because they're mutually supportive. The bid and SID raises some monies which allow you to do some, preservation in the downtown and improve the downtown and attract investment. Again, just using McCutcheon as an example. Some similarity clearly to Dunellen with the railroad. They adopted a SID. They have a Main Street program. McCutcheon had a Great American Main Street. Well, you've been winning a lot of awards lately, on smart growth and downtowns. Go you. And again, in McCutcheon, the combination, maybe, preservation and Main Street and SIDS have had a material effect. So if you look at, property values over time, of course, there are many forces that influence property value. Okay. All right. So what's another way to preserve? All right. And the thought here is, you know what? You may want to not consider what else, commission, identifying properties, heralding the potential of the federal and state historic tax credit in the downtown and other areas of Dunellen. But independent of that, oral history. What's an oral history? Basically, that people interview other people. Okay, they interview long-term residents, seniors, etc. Who does the interviewing? There are entities trained in this. Actually, a nice way of doing it is to have the community do it. Have students do it. Make it part of a school project. So, by the way, StoryCorps, they've been doing oral history since the early 2000s. They've done almost 650,000 interviews. So, if you want to say, how would I go about doing an oral history? Well, this is one entity that can be contacted and collaborated with. Many communities in New Jersey have done oral histories, on different facets of their histories. In New Brunswick, they brought in StoryCorps, okay? And they did about 12 or 14 of these oral histories. It's now memorialized in the New Brunswick Library on that. And again, because older people are not always around. The memory of the community, the way it was, changes, etc. So it's sort of nice to do this, etc. And I thought, in a helpful way, what's another way that Dunellen may want to consider doing oral history as well? Rutgers has something called the Rutgers Oral History Archive, and they've done like 1,300 oral histories, and it's all digitized, and you can put in a keyword, and it spits out 10, 20, 30 histories on that. All right. So I mentioned to them about our work in Dunellen. I said, is there any way you could help? And the answer is, they said yes. They said, they could supervise it or conduct it. I think the nice thing would be, since they've done it and they know what they're doing, this sort of say, all right, if Dunellen wanted to do oral histories, all right, show us a way and help launch it, etc. So this could be a nice support. And it works both ways. Rutgers wants to show that it's connected to local communities in New Jersey. Okay. So besides other aspects of preservation, tax credits and what have you, I think oral histories is something to consider. Maybe with the school district, maybe collaborating with StoryCorps or Rutgers, etc. Okay, I'm just going to end with this. One of the students here was a design concentration. So what do you think they focus on? Yes, okay. The short story is, and I give the community credit. Dunellen has been giving a lot of thought to enhance design. Here, this is where design is spoken about, and this is just a partial list in various Dunellen studies and documents. You did a visual preference survey. That's like a go-to. And you ask people, well, what do you think of A versus B? And you've seen this before. So you really have the foundation to then go from this prior work and the visual preference survey to how to enhance design, especially in the downtown. Okay. And I'm not going to spend too much time here. We said, well, let's look at two areas in Dunellen. Let's look at it currently. The student who's not here, they do their design idea, and you can see, how to make it a little safer with more crosswalks, what have you, additional lighting, etc. Of course, your main street, you don't have full regulation on it. Let's face it, okay. And again, some thoughts here. And the community, you've given this thought, on how to enhance design. So this is just some further thoughts from the student. Okay. Sidewalks, we can always enhance and incent that you control the sidewalks, et cetera. Okay, so these are just some thought. All right, so bottom line, we appreciate the opportunity to have done the studio here. Okay. I'd like to think we have introduced you to these two topics that really connect. You know, preservation and economic development, okay? In part, and there have been savvy people investing in town, but there may be other opportunities to use the historic tax credit as an example. Maybe with a historic tax credit and low-income housing tax credit, even though they don't have to be linked, et cetera, et cetera. And especially with the new state historic tax credit, people are trying to figure out exactly how it works. It's a nice resource when many resources are limited, okay? And also this oral history, fine, you have commission, you don't have your state historic tax rate, federal tax rate, yes. And maybe that's, a community or a school project on that. And maybe working with StoryCorps, maybe working with Rutgers. If Rutgers said they're willing to help, I would take advantage of that. Okay, so thank you. I'm sure I've gone way over my allotted time. Okay, that's professor stuff. Okay, all right. So thank you, and I'm willing. Any thoughts, questions? I'm happy to hear.
I have a question.
Yes.
In light of the federal government spending being curtailed,
Yes.
given the two proposals, making a federal component of the state proposal.
Yes.
And we know that there is the government looking at cutting out certain
Okay.
grants. Okay. So that's likely impact to the tax.
Okay, so that's an astute observation, given what's going on. We don't know where we are with a lot of programs. I remember I was involved in 2017 when they passed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, where they wanted to get rid of the federal historic tax credit, et cetera. I remember we went down to DC, we explained some of the benefits, et cetera. Actually, we do an annual study for the Park Service. Who knows about the future? But there is a lot of support across the spectrum for the historic tax credit. And it's been successfully used, for many decades now, really from the late 1970s. So you don't know about the future, but I'd like to think it will continue. And maybe, can you do it just with the state historic tax credit? It's harder. But you see, in a time of, there were just limited resources. And see, what's different with the historic tax credit, the state historic tax credit is capped, by the federal is totally uncapped. Almost every other tax credit is capped. It's competitive. You just have so much low-income housing tax credits. You have so much new market tax credits, and you've got to compete. The federal tax credit is uncapped, both on how much each year and on the size of the project. And it's been used for decades, so it's pretty clear, how do you go about doing it so you get the benefit? That doesn't answer may it change in the future. Yes, and then.
Councilmember.
I love the rendering, we did on it, but have any other studies or surveys been done on potential historic landmarks in Dunellen?
Well, okay, I've been searching. More attention needs to be paid. You see, when you think about a landmark, you think, oh my God, it's Mount Vernon. It's not, it's really not that. It's a very broad spectrum of history, persons, architecture, cultural achievement, et cetera, on that. And I have no doubt that Dunellen, along with other communities, it's been under-identified in terms of what might be eligible for the, let's start with the federal historic tax credit, which, by the way, does not then regulate the private property rights of the owner. That's a misnomer. People think, oh, you're on the national register, we're gonna regulate you. No, that's just, if there's a federal undertaking that'll affect the property, you have to go through the review process. I teach historic preservation, and I look at, a lot of this application. I mean, I was walking downtown Dunellen. It's nice. There are a lot of properties. That drugstore example that I showed you, I think it was South Carolina, that looks like a lot of your properties. On that. Now, it has to be, you have to have the fabric, it wasn't totally changed, etc. There's usually an age cutoff of 50 years, but lots of things at 50 years old, etc. And often what happens is, developer wanting to use the historic tax credit, then brings in a preservation consultant who then, does the paperwork, which then gets the property on the register, which then qualifies the property for the tax credit. Again, there's a lot of fabric in Dunellen that's intact and attractive. And again, it's not Washington slept here, and it's not the penultimate architectural achievement of Monticello with Jefferson. It's not that. It's not that. Your downtown is an historic downtown.
Any other questions? Dr. Listikin? Without hearing any, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Went well over my allotted time. So
It's all good. We're always happy to hear from you, Dr. Listikin.
thank you. When you appreciate the opportunity, I mean, I told the students, this is really disappointing. You should be. Well,
Understood, yeah.
all right, thank you, thank you.
Well, thank you to Rutgers University, Edwards Blaustein School of Planning and Public Policy, Dr. David Listikin and his students for this presentation tonight. We've worked with the Blaustein School over the years for many different surveys and studies, and I'm grateful for our ongoing collaboration. And it will continue, my friend, correct? Hopefully, right? Good, thank you. Okay. Item number 4 on the agenda is mayor's appointments to board committees and commissions. Tonight, we have one appointment of Tara Duggan to the Mayor's Cannabis Task Force and to the Dunellen Downtown Management Organization. So thank you to Tara for stepping up to the plate. She is not here this evening, and thank you again. David, thank you again. Get home safe. We'll talk soon enough. Item number 5 on the agenda is proclamations. This evening, we have a proclamation recognizing February as Black History Month. And tonight we are going to invite up Tom Murray. He is a Dunellen business owner and resident. We want to thank him for joining us this evening to read the official proclamation recognizing February's Black History Month in the borough of Dunellen. Tom is the owner of Smack and Rolls food truck, which is frequently spotted at Dunellen borough events and makes a variety of unique and delicious egg rolls from scratch. And so welcome, Tom. And at this time, we ask that you join us and to read the proclamation.
Yeah, I see your bills for days. Thank you. Because I forgot my glasses. These are not mine. I will now read proclamation recognizing Black History Month. Whereas Black History Month is an annual celebration of achievements by African Americans and a time for recognizing their central role in U.S. history. And whereas Black History Month was preceded by the establishment of Negro History Week by Carter G. Woodson and the Association for the Study of African American Life and History in 1926. Whereas the 2025 theme for Black History Month focuses on the various and profound ways that work and working of all kinds, free and unfree, skilled and unskilled, vocational and voluntary, intersect with the collective experiences of Black people. And whereas the Borough of Dunellen recognizes the contributions of African Americans to our borough, county, state, and country, and reinforces our commitment to be a community of opportunity and hope for every citizen. And whereas the Borough of Dunellen separates its rich cultural and ethnic diversity, respecting each of our neighbors, friends, family, members, and business owners based on content of their character. And whereas our community is better because of the diversity of our population. Now therefore, be it resolved. That's you.
That I, Mayor Jason F. Salento, of the Dunellen Borough Council,
Okay. Recognize February as Black History Month in the Borough of Dunellen and encourage residents to join us in celebrating and honoring the history and culture of the African American community throughout this month. Signed on the third day of February 2025, Mayor Jason F. Salento. Thank you.
thank you again to Mr. Murray, a longtime resident business owner. And if you haven't tried his smack and rolls, certainly give them a shot. They're very, very good. So, and congratulations on the business and the growth that it's seen over the past the past couple of years, right? Not even? Okay, so within a year. So God bless you and continue the good work, my friend. Okay. Next up is item number 6 on the agenda, the approval of our meeting minutes from the January 21st council meeting. Can I have a motion, a second, please?
Move it, Sigmund.
Second, Albertson.
Any comments or additions or edits to the meeting minutes as they currently stand? Without hearing any, can we take a roll call, please?
Mrs. Albertson,
Yes.
Mrs. Lance,
Yes.
Mrs. Rios,
Yes.
Mr. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Sigmund,
Yes.
and Mr. Vandermark.
Yes.
Item number 2 on the agenda is the introduction of ordinances. We have 2 this evening, 2025-04 and 2025-05. For those in the audience who might not be aware of how the process works on ordinances, mayor and council introduce an ordinance or ordinances. They are basically introduced to the public, and they're not really just debated on just yet. But if they're approved to move forward at the next council meeting, they would be publicly heard and possibly adopted after the public has an opportunity to have a say on them, and mayor and council have an opportunity to debate on them should we want to make further amendments or changes. After tonight's meeting, you can then pick up the ordinances for your reading at the municipal clerk's office if you want a hard copy, or you can find them online. So first up, can I have a motion and second on 2025-04, an ordinance to amend the general legislation of the Borough of Dunellen Municipal Code, Chapter 233, Sewer Use, Article 1, General Regulations, Section 37, Sewer Rates?
Move it, Sigmund.
Second, Lance.
Just to summarize this really quick, every year we have to do this statutorily, so the tax collector can issue the sewer utility bills. But in recent years, the Borough of Dunellen has completed several necessary sewer main upgrades as part of our commitment to maintaining and improving the infrastructure of our community and to ensure reliable wastewater service for our residents and businesses. And to ensure, as I stated, this work has covered approximately 1,300 feet of sewer mains throughout the borough, including the repair of bypass line on Grove Street to South Madison Avenue, Railroad Avenue, Pulaski Street, Grove Street, Jackson Avenue, and Klein Place. Since 2020, the borough has taken a very proactive approach to maintaining our aging sewer infrastructure, utilizing camera and video inspections to monitor the conditions of the systems, allowing us to better plan for replacement and lining rather than more costly repairs in the event of a sewer break. As a direct result of these efforts, we were able to line 1,180 feet of the 3,100 feet of sewer main underneath Second Street, a process that extends the longevity of sewer mains by 30 to 40 years, and at a fraction of the cost of emergency repairs. So most importantly, to take note from this summary is to help cover the cost of these critical improvements, the borough will be implementing a slight sewer tax rate adjustment with an increase of $15 in 2025. So that brings it from $3.50 to $3.65 should mayor and council move this forward. This will help offset the cost of these improvements while easing the financial impact on the tax rate payers. It is important to note that the borough of Dunellen has not seen a sewer tax increase since 2017, despite the rising costs in infrastructure maintenance being passed on to the borough by the Plainfield Area Regional Sewer Authority, commonly known as PARSA, and of course, general inflation. So in nearly a decade, we've not seen an increase, and so we're going to possibly see a $15 increase. So from $3.50 to $3.65. Should that be the decision of the council. But costs are rising, we have to cover them. Okay, so with that, take a roll call, please.
Mrs. Albertson,
Yes.
Mrs. Lance,
Yes.
Mrs. Rios,
Yes.
Mr. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Sigmund,
Yes.
and Mr. Vandermark.
Yes.
Can I have a motion and second on 2025-05 bond ordinance providing for municipal facilities capital needs assessment in and by the borough of Dunellen, appropriating $80,000 therefore and authorizing the issuance of 76,000 bonds or notes of the borough to finance part of the cost.
Move it, Sigmund.
Second, Lance.
To summarize, this is a facility assessment for our building we're currently in, as well as other buildings. One being a part of a conditional redevelopment agreement that we entered into to basically assess what improvements need to be done so we can actually function at the 21st century level and providing quality municipal services, as well as ensuring that we are able to provide public safety the way it should be able to be provided in facilities. So this is that's what that is we're funding the feasibility studies.
Okay, we'll take a roll call. Mrs. Albertson,
Yes.
Mrs. Lance,
Yes.
Mrs. Rios,
Yes.
Mr. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Sigmund,
Yes.
and Mr. Vandermark.
Yes.
Item number 8 on the agenda is the adoption of ordinances. We have 3 this evening, 2025-01. Can I have a motion and second on that? It's an ordinance to amend ordinance 2024-32, repealing and replacing chapter 202 parking meters of the Borough Code in its entirety.
Second, Albertson.
Okay, thank you. At this moment in time, we'll open the floor to the public solely on 2025-01. We ask that you please state your name and address and discuss solely this item. Without hearing any comment from the public, we'll open the floor to mayor and council on 2025-01 for discussion. Without hearing any discussion, can we have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Albertson,
Yes.
Mrs. Lance,
Yes.
Mrs. Rios,
Yes.
Mr. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Sigmund,
Yes.
and Mr. Vandermark.
Yes.
Can I have a motion and second on 2025-02, an ordinance to amend and supplement the general legislation of the Borough of Dunellen, chapter 202?
Move it, Sigmund.
Second, Albertson.
Mrs. Stats, just for clarification before we open up to the public, this was a clerical error, correct, that we had to correct?
Correct. Also fixing 2025-01 with the chapter and number.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
We'll open the floor to the public solely on 2025-02. We ask that you please state your name and address and discuss solely this item. Without hearing any, we'll close that. Opening the floor to mayor and council on 2025-02. Without hearing any, we'll take a roll call.
Mrs. Albertson,
Yes.
Mrs. Lance,
Yes.
Mrs. Rios,
Yes.
Mr. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Sigmund,
Yes.
and Mr. Vandermark.
Yes.
Right. Can I have a motion and second on 2025-03 bond ordinance amending section 3G, right, G description of the project in the bond ordinance of 2024-21. I might need new contacts. Sorry.
Move it, Sigmund.
Second Albertson.
Okay, just so the public is aware, this is the amending of the description of the project to read as follows: installation of flashing beacon signs at various locations, including but not limited to Madison Avenue and Washington Avenue intersections with First Street and Dunellen Avenue, South Washington Avenue and Orange Street intersections, and New Market Road and Grove Street intersections, and further including all work and materials necessary therefore and incidental thereto. So mainly those rapid beacon lights you see on Lincoln Avenue on other locations that are heavy trafficked. So open the floor to the public on 2025-03. We ask that you please state your name and address and discuss solely this item. Without hearing any, we'll close that portion and we'll open the floor to mayor and council on 2025-03. Okay, without further discussion, we'll take a roll call, please.
Mrs. Albertson,
Yes.
Mrs. Lance,
Yes.
Mrs. Rios,
Yes.
Mr. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Sigmund,
Yes.
and Mr. Vandermark.
Yes.
Item number 9 on the agenda is our resolutions. We have resolutions 82 through 89. Mrs. Stats, if you can read them out and just give mayor and council an opportunity to discuss them if we so choose.
Resolution number 82 is to pay the bills.
Move it, Sigmund.
Second Lance.
Mrs. Albertson,
Yes.
Mrs. Lance,
Yes.
Mrs. Rios,
Yes.
Mr. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Sigmund,
Yes.
and Mr. Vandermark.
Yes.
Resolution number 83 is authorizing DMR Architects to prepare the redevelopment plan for Block 85, Lot 3.
Move it, Sigmund.
Second Albertson.
As council may remember, this is the properties behind the K Hovnanian project. Well, famously known as the Dunellen Station project. They're currently warehouses. Last year we did an area need of redevelopment study. It was deemed appropriate for development. So the developer, being K Hovnanian again, is coming to the table to present townhouses, for sale townhouses. The initial project was discussed as apartments, and we did push back on that for the area. And so that is what they're going to be proposing at the given time. But in order to get there, we have to have DMR present a redevelopment plan for that area.
Okay, I'll take a roll. Mrs. Albertson,
Yes.
Mrs. Lance,
Yes.
Mrs. Rios,
Yes.
Mr. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Sigmund,
Yes.
and Mr. Vandermark.
Yes.
Resolution number 84 is authorizing the filing and settlement of tax appeals.
Move it Albertson.
Second, Sigmund.
Mrs. Albertson,
Yes.
Mrs. Lance,
Yes.
Mrs. Rios,
Yes.
Mr. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Sigmund,
Yes.
and Mr. Vandermark.
Yes.
Resolution number 85 is to hire summer art camp teachers for the Dunellen Arts Inclusion and Culture Commission Summer Art Camp.
Move it Albertson.
Second, Sigmund.
Have a question.
Sure.
Just want to clarify that, so that, you know, that people know that the people that are hiring for this are being paid from the recreation department, correct? Through the money that's raised.
There's a separate trust account for the Dunellen Arts Inclusion
Okay,
Culture.
that's-
Correct. Yep.
That's what I want to make sure. Yeah. That it's being handled that way, it's not an additional charge.
No.
towards the town.
Yeah, we get grants from Middlesex County.
But it's
Yep.
from- No, so it's-
Yep, they're
And-
paid per hour in the position of without benefits, and they'll be paid through purchase order.
And And most programs, actually all programs that we do through Recreation and the Arts Commission is self-sustaining.
Just like an ask. Yes, you know, we'll find out, make sure that it's.
Okay, hope we give them some reassurances, Council. Thank you. You're welcome. Any other questions?
Okay. Mrs. Albertson?
Yes.
Mrs. Lance?
Yes.
Mrs. Rios?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Sigmund?
Yes.
And Mr. Vandermark.
Yes.
Resolution number 86 is to award a contract to Wells Fargo for the clerk's office and police department copy machines.
Move it, Sigmund.
Second, Lance.
Mrs. Albertson?
Yes.
Mrs. Lance?
Yes.
Mrs. Rios?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Sigmund?
Yes.
And Mr. Vandermark.
Yes.
Resolution number 87 is to authorize professional services for general engineering to CME Associates for the preparation of a SAGE grant application.
Move it, Sigmund.
Second, Albertson.
Mrs. Albertson?
Yes.
Mrs. Lance?
Yes.
Mrs. Rios?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Sigmund?
Yes.
And Mr. Vandermark.
Yes.
Resolution number 88 is to transfer appropriation reserves for the 2024 operating accounts.
Move it, Sigmund.
Second, Rios. Mrs. Albertson?
Yes.
Mrs. Lance?
Yes.
Mrs. Rios?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Sigmund?
Yes.
And Mr. Vandermark.
Yes.
Resolution number 89 is to adopt the 2025 temporary capital budget.
Move it,
Rios.
Second, Sigmund.
Rios. Sigmund. Mrs. Albertson?
Yes.
Mrs. Lance?
Yes.
Mrs. Rios?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Sigmund?
Yes.
And Mr. Vandermark.
Yes. Item number 10 on the agenda is the consent agenda, and I have a motion and second on 90 through 93, unless there's a specific resolution council members would like to pull out, we just ask that you state the contract.
Second, Rios. Mrs. Albertson?
Yes.
Mrs. Lance?
Yes.
Mrs. Rios?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Sigmund?
Yes.
And Mr. Vandermark.
Yes. Next up is item number 11 on the agenda, council reports. Council member Albertson, anything to report this evening?
Not this evening, thank you.
Wow. Council member Rios, anything to report?
Yes.
I just said wow, because normally she has a very blank. So,
Things are-
sorry, Council.
Board of Education, parent engagement sessions. The school district is hosting a series of parent engagement sessions. The first session took place tonight at 6:30 p.m., focusing on social media safety, understanding harassment and intimidation and bullying, HIB. The next session is scheduled for Tuesday, February 18th at 6:30 p.m. and the topic, how to be a trusted adult. ESL parent classes. Board of Ed is now in the second year of their ESL classes. The winter session is being taught by Dunellen High School teacher Mario Amana Vargas and has seen a strong attendance. For more information about these classes, please contact Pablo Ortiz. Employment opportunities for the Board of Ed. They are looking for substitute nurses, substitute teachers, and custodians. If interested, please reach out to Ms. Lubliner for more information. Next Board of Ed meeting will be on February 25th at 7 p.m. Buildings and ground, IT update at Borough Hall and Police Department. Over the past few months, several IT processes have been updated to enhance efficiency, security at both Borough Hall and Police Department. Borough Hall set up new laptop PC and the tax assessors and court and the firehouse. Supported the installation of a new phone system at Borough Hall, Police Department, and DPW, provided monthly monitoring, maintenance of servers and PCs, troubleshooted and resolve day-to-day technical issues. Police Department collaborated with vendors to install the new front door cameras, door access system, set up and installed multiple mobile computers in police vehicles, diagnosed and resolved communication issues in car 502, created new officer accounts, migrated data, services, retired an old PD server left by a previous IT provider. These updates support and continued reliability and security in our IT infrastructure across departments. Dunellen Public Library. Stay up to date with our latest events by visiting our Facebook page and website. We're excited to introduce our new museum. Well, they're not new, but we've gotten more. So our Museum Pass program, sponsored by the Friends of the Library. To check out and use the museum passes, you must have a valid Dunellen Public Library card. Our available museum passes include the the Newark Museum of Art, American Museum of Natural History, Guggenheim Museum, Turtleback Zoo, Intrepid Sea, Air, and Space Museum, Storm King Art Center, Montclair Art Museum. Be sure to contact us or visit the library to check pass availability before planning your visit. And Greenbrook Flood Commission. The upcoming meeting will be held via Zoom on Wednesday at February 5th. That's all.
The police department has adopted year 2024. The department's issued 4,220 summonses, made 3,026 more vehicle stops, and had 167 arrests. New officers will be trained now, and more will be added in the future. Once trained, we will be back to a full complement of officers, and will be learning the public safety position, which will help with the efficient enforcement of the military.
Yes, so from the Dunellen Arts Inclusion and Culture Commission, recently it was discussed over the month of January about putting together some kind of art show, something that would feature and exemplify Black History Month. And so last month, the commission sponsored a Black History Art Show contest in partnership with Dunellen High School's art program led by Mr. Larry Roybal. Dunellen High School, along with the Dunellen Arts and Inclusion Culture Commission, has announced the winners of the Black History Month art contest. Janine Adrian won first place for her painting of artist Jean-Michel Basquiat. Hunter Mulligan took second place with a painting depicting civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr., embracing modern recording artist Kendrick Lamar. The mayor and council look forward to acknowledging Black History Month with a recognition event for the contest winners, which will take place on February 18th. The artwork will be displayed at the high school from February 1st to February 18th, after which it will move to the Dunellen Library. An exhibition of all submitted acrylic paintings can be found at a link that maybe we can share through the Dunellen Arts Inclusion and Culture Commission. And we want to thank everyone for their participation. You should really check it out. The work is beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And so, I'm sorry, the commission has also been in preparation for Spring into Wellness, which is set for May 4th, coinciding with the open air market and featuring health-focused performances. They have a Unity Day scheduled. And they're already planning for the warmer weather with the summer art program and music and plays in the park. So there's more information to come. I also have a report from the Recreation Department. Dunellen Recreation was pleased to host its annual Senior Citizen Holiday Luncheon on Saturday, January 25th at the newly restored firehouse. It was a wonderful turnout of 50 seniors who enjoyed a delicious dinner and games along with musical entertainment and sing-alongs led by Carl Geiger on the piano. The Recreation Department is very grateful for the support from Mayor Salento and all the council members. We are especially thankful to the Dunellen Fire Department for the use of the hall, along with all those who helped serve the seniors throughout the event, including Recreation Commission members Jim Brennan and Kathy Wilson, Mayor Salento, council members Grisolidis Lance, Trina Rios, and Hal Vandermark. We're also thankful for volunteers Kate Riskuski, Tyler Mayer, and Suleiman Khan for their assistance in making this an enjoyable event. Registration is now open for spring programs such as baseball, softball, and tennis. Baseball is offered to children ages 4 through 8. Softball is offered to children grades 1st through 8th, and tennis is available for children ages 6 through 17. The registration deadline for baseball and softball is March 10th, and the registration deadline for tennis is April 1st. So to avoid late fees, don't wait to register. Dunellen Recreation is also pleased to offer Spring Open Soccer, a free program for Dunellen residents. In order to make this program available, they need support from volunteer coaches. Depending on how many volunteer coaches they have, that will determine how many children they can admit into the program. So if your child is interested and you're available, we encourage you to step off the sidelines and into the field. This program is low commitment and run strictly by volunteers. So if you're interested in being a volunteer coach, please contact Rec Program Coordinator Kelly Cedar at kcedar@dunellenborough.com. And although it's still winter, it's never too early to start prepping for the summer. Dunellen's Rec Summer Camp is available for children ages 5 through 12 and begins on Monday, June 16th. It's a 9-week program that lasts from 8 a.m. through 3 p.m. daily with a late pickup option until 5 p.m. Children will be engaged throughout the program with fun activities, including different sports, outdoor recreation, crafts, field trips, scavenger hunts, walking trips, and more. Register by Friday, February 14th, and receive the early bird special discount. Space is limited, so register early. And that is all.
Okay, thank you. That was a great senior holiday party, and Homer was in the audience giving you 2 thumbs up, so Homer was happy with it too. Councilmember Sigmund?
Yes, thank you. So I had the pleasure of joining the Shade Tree Commission's first meeting of the year where officers were elected. And I believe Ken Bodendissel, who is the chair, has over 20 rings of service. And thank you to all of the volunteers for dedicating their time and effort to our town. I'm looking forward to a booming or blooming season and the release of our tree inventory. I also want to give a special thanks to Enrique, one of the members, for helping me identify the trees in front of my house and giving me tips to have better apples from my trees. So thank you, Enrique, and the Shade Tree Commission.
Okay,
That's it.
thank you, Councilman. Councilmember Scott?
I can't top that report. So for DPW, they continue to routinely clean the downtown and the parks and properties. They finished picking up the Christmas trees around the borough, removed dead trees, one on Prospect, one on Walnut Street, trimmed multiple trees on Dunellen Ave, updated the various bilingual signs in the DPW yard, and they began the yearly process of inspecting and cleaning each of the catch basins in the borough. This process will continue over the next few months, and I believe there's over 700 catch basins. It's a long process. Mechanic Division,
God bless.
they service the police fleet as they're due for maintenance or as breakdowns arise. Service the DPW equipment and fleet vehicles for maintenance and breakdowns as they arise. And they repaired the plows and the stow equipment after the last storm. And that's my report.
Okay, thank you.
Not as interesting.
Well, they did a great job after the last snowstorm, curb to curb. Always going to do a good job. In terms of DPW and the signs for downtown, when will the no parking overnight be placed, if it's not been placed already? Okay, I see the 15-minute parking in certain locations. Okay, so are we looking towards the end of the month or? Okay, thank you. So my report this evening, actually fairly quick. Just reporting out from the engineers, CME Associates, the Washington Avenue street lighting project. The projects have been awarded and CME is coordinating the approval of the award with the New Jersey Department of Transportation local aid and the required construction contract. So more to report over time. Second Street Phase 1, the project's been awarded and CME is coordinating the approvals with the NJDOT local aid. And again, the required construction contracts that go along with it. The Railroad Ave Culvert project, CME and the Borough Administrator met with representatives from the Army Corps and DEP to discuss the status of the improvements and whether or not they have improved tailwater conditions in the Bonnegat Brook. CME shared their analysis with them and they agreed to review them and get back to us later. So more to report, hopefully in the coming weeks. Strip joint, or known as 635 Boundbrook Road. Demolition and remediation bid documents have been prepared and are under final review. CME anticipates transmitting them to the borough next week. CME has discussed the street lighting conversion costs with Mike Coyle of PSE&G as directed by Frank Lucchese. Mr. Coyle contacted Bob Hughes of PSE&G regarding the borough's concern. And PSE&G maintains that costs are going to be required. We're trying to push back on them that it's not just the implementation cost. Beyond the implementation cost, they've increased the amount in which we'd be paying monthly, and we're pushing back because they're LEDs, so they should not be more expensive over month than what they currently are underneath their current status. The Maurer House, a walkthrough of the building was conducted, and the assessment is underway. CME will continue to monitor the work being performed by Comcast. And CME is reviewing the grant requirements for 500 Mountain View bike path and preparing budget figures for the borough's use. So a lot going on. Yeah, so that's that from me. Item number 11 is council discussion. There's nothing on this part of the meeting this evening. Item number 13 is department head reports. Okay. I'm going to ask legal to report back on a question that was presented at last council meeting. So if you wouldn't mind discussing.
Yes, Mayor, at the last meeting, there was a question raised by Councilman Vandermark with regard to the licensing of, specifically, it was a beauty parlor, I believe, license. The question was about limiting the number of those type of establishments with the idea of encouraging other types of retail in the downtown district. My opinion at that time was confirmed. I did look into the issue. My concern about that issue was that it would violate equal protection restrictions and rights. And there were a number of cases that I found that would indicate, unless there's a rational basis for that type of classification, that type of ordinance would be barred by equal protection rights. There are a handful of situations. Historically, gas stations have had some kind of distance regulations, but even those now are being called into question. So based upon the research I did, my conclusion was that that type of ordinance would not be sustained unless there was some very compelling, rational basis for the classification.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on the legal front?
No other, thank you.
Okay, so the legal opinion is consistent what we've been told from municipal council in the past, as well as from our redevelopment council. So now it's again duly noted on the record. So thank you. Municipal clerk.
It's a little early, but just a reminder that the primary election has been changed from Tuesday, June 3rd to Tuesday, June 10th.
Yes. And just so we note it on record here, last year, based upon the request from the school district, it was the last year's we'll be doing elections in the school. So we are assessing other locations through the county's boards of elections on whether they'll be good to go. You've discussed with the department heads on those. Okay, so the County Board of Elections is going to assess the library, as well as the firehouse. And of course, we'll hope to maintain the senior center. So we're looking at keeping 2 or 3 polling stations. So, okay. Okay. Administration. IT. Okay. OEM. Yeah, something's going on. Do I have to go out and play the lottery? Between the two of you, no report? We're joking. We appreciate everything you do, Homer. Police department? Nothing. How's parking authority back there?
We're working.
You're working, enforcing? Rescue squad?
So if any chief want to volunteer, go to the website, rescue.org, and our training, reach out to the rescue squad.
Okay, thank you. Okey doke. Next on the agenda is item number 14, public comments. We're gonna open the floor to those in chambers first, then we'll go to online, and then we'll do a general blanket. We ask for those in chambers, please state your name and address, and the microphone is right up front.
Good evening, Council. I'm Angelo Fasaponte Manella, address 2,
Yes.
634 Boundbrook Road. So this is perhaps tangentially related to the ordinance on pedestrian lights on Lincoln Avenue. I want to raise concern over the emergency light overlooking North Avenue and Lincoln Avenue. I think it poses a concern to all pedestrians, but especially students walking to and from school. Since from my observation, drivers seem to mistake it for a normal intersection with the green light, which gives them the impression that they have the right of way. And I've seen many pedestrian incidents of drivers going through an intersection with students currently in it, or other close calls like that. So I would personally like to see it turned off, or even better, have some pedestrian crossing lights on either side, just like up the road.
Okay, well, thank you for that concern. I'll address both. Being that the rescue squad is no longer there, it was there to let people know that you can drive past the rescue squad and it would turn red when the rescue squad had to come out.
Right.
Can we check on the status of turning it off, the removal, but if not the removal, at least turning it off for now? Okay, thank you. Speaking of the rapid beacon lights that you're speaking of, aside from Madison Avenue on First and Dunellen, and Washington Avenue, Dunellen and First, as well as South Washington Avenue and Orange going into Columbia Street, and New Market and Grove. Those are one project. The one at Grove and New Market and Washington and Orange are actually being funded by a grant we got. The other two we are funding by capital. Now, getting to the downtown, there's going to be those rapid beacon lights at key intersection, Boundbrook Road and Sanford, Lincoln Avenue and North Avenue, Prospect Ave and North Ave, and Jackson Ave and North Ave. And so that's going to be, we got the funding for those through redevelopment agreements where we negotiated community benefits from the developers. So there is good things get from developers. So they're funding a lot of pedestrian safety measures in the downtown. We were able to convince the DOT, they're coming through. They've been saying since 2020, when I first became mayor, they were going to improve all the ADA compliant ramps. And then it got postponed and postponed and postponed. But you'll probably see they're starting to get the areas prepped at the crosswalks. So we were able to convince them to coordinate the installation of them alongside of when those crosswalks were getting implemented. So they were actually supposed to be implemented earlier, the crosswalks, but there was a delay because we pushed to get the beacon lights as part of the project. So you'll see the crosswalks go in, and then hopefully by the end of this year, you'll see the beacon lights.
Okay, great.
So your
Thank
mind's in the right place.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other members of the public? We ask that you please state your name and address.
Hello, David Atkinstein, 247 Penfield, President of Dunellen Rescue Squad. With the comment prior with the emergency lights, on, Route 28, I know there was a lot, of time that took to get those lights there. It's a good idea to move them, and in the process of moving them, we already know our new location. So maybe instead of just, removing them and putting them away, we can have them, two things at once, get them into the new location properly.
It'll all depend upon what the current MUTCD standards are. So if they're, because everything else, they update everything, and so
I figured,
it'd be great to put them over there, but in the meantime, we'll try to get us. Alex will talk to the DOT about if we can do that. There might be updates that we have to do to code or whatever the state statute is. And then if not, we're gonna at least look to address the concern of how do we at least turn them off for the time being.
Sure.
Because that's a good point. Okay, thank you, David. Any other members of the public, please state your name and address that are in chambers. If not, we'll move to online. How's the rehab of Bub's Boba? Getting there, slowly but surely. Oh, great. Oh, sooner. I was hearing like April, but I'm happy to hear it's closer. So, great, great. How's business over at East Coast Iron? Good. Okay, we'll open the floor to members of the public who are joining us virtually. Please state your name and address. Without hearing any from the public virtually, we'll open the floor generally, just so we cover our bases. Please state your name and address. All members of the public, both in person and virtual. Okay, without hearing any, we'll close that portion of the meeting. We have no executive meeting this evening. So the next up is item number 15, adjournment. Before we do that, I will say the next mayor and council meeting will be held on Tuesday, February 18th, 2025, clearly at 7 p.m. in these chambers. You can join in person or virtually. So without further ado, can I have a motion second on item number 94, adjournment?
Move it, Sigmund.
Second, Scott.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? I'm waiting.